Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome to today's session. And for today's session, we are going to discuss about the mid-book that we have already published for you people for the sake of the practice of SBR exam. Now it's time for the debriefing of the mid-mock. It's time for the debriefing of the mid-mock. So now the very first question that we are going to discuss, that is about MASH. So very important thing, whenever you watching that video, either the live, either the recording, it's your wish, either live, either recording, whenever you are watching that particular video, do remember a very important point. That you must have to compare your answer, whatever I am discussing the solution. In simple word, it's not just about watching the video. It's actually about watching the video and observing what the mistake you have done, and then identify the gap, the difference between your answer and then the answer I am suggesting to you. In future, whatever the gap recently you identified, you have to cover that gap for the sake of future developments, for the sake of future betterment, for remaining practice questions as well as for the examination. Now start. The very first question, that is MASH. Okay, now what the question about? Quickly I'm going to discuss. Number one, the requirement. Discuss why finance director fair value measurement is not in line with international financial reporting standard, and discuss the ethical issues that arise. That means this part of question, it's not only about the knowledge of the syllabus related to accounting standard, but also some ethical matter. Also related to some ethical matter. So now, related to ethical aspect and related to accounting issue, you must have to remember the very important thing. Once you are reading the question, you need to identify the accounting issue separately, and you need to identify the ethical issue separately. So the first thing we will identify and even attempt the question with accounting implications. Now come on. MASH has a number of investment in listed shares that are designated to be measured at fair value through other comprehensive income. A new qualified accountant has started work at MASH, and she discovered the finance director measures fair value of these investments as the present value of expected future dividend receipts. This calculation gives higher fair value figure than the quoted share price. So this paragraph actually mixes with two things. Number one, accounting issues. Number two, if the accountant identified some discrepancies, so that is about the knowledge of the accounting standard. Whatever the discrepancies, it's about the knowledge of accounting standard. But the number two, second important point, why this discrepancies arises. So why is about, in this case, the reflection is that the management or the director wanted to exaggerate the value of the asset, reporting the asset with a higher price. So this is something about ethics. Okay. Now, the finance director has justified the fair value measurement to the accountant on the grounds that MASH does not trade shares in the short term. And so quoted share price understate the value that MASH will realize over the life of this investment. So here, the examiner mentioning the justification of finance director. The finance director here justify in a wrong manner that actually we don't have a plan to sell the shares for the short term. That's why we can report the price with our level 2 or 3 inputs and ignoring the quoted share price value. So now, requirement discuss why finance director fair value measurement is not in line with international financial reporting standard and discuss the ethical issue. Candidates, I must say a very important point to you. Whenever you are going to attempt the examination question, do remember that you have before attempting, you have planning of the question. It's very important. The planning includes whatever I have discussed with my previous videos about the time management, about the marks management. But here I am specifically say that assuming you have identified that, for example, this is about the 5 marks. For 5 marks, you have 1.8 minutes each mark. 1.8 minutes for each mark. 5 multiplied by 1.8, that is 9 minutes. And you have to spend at least 20% of the time for the planning. Planning, the very critical thing about the planning, for at least for 2 minutes you have to spend for this question. 2 minutes for the planning. That's what to write. Number 1, time management. Number 2, how much to write. How much to write according to marks 5. But what to write? So think the moment what should I have to write. Number 1, I have to write with respect to IFRS 13. That is fair value measurement. It's not compulsory to write the complete name of the accounting standard. You can just refer IFRS 13, the number. And even you are not recalling the number, you just mention according to accounting standard. This is allowed. Number 2, here the issue about related to measurement, the inputs. And here about the reference of level 1 input available. Level 1 input available, but director wants to even level 1 input available, quoted share price, wants to ignore level 1 and move towards level 2 or 3. This is what about exaggerating. Number 2, ethics. About the ethics, you have to first plan the things, not necessarily by writing of the things. Maybe just thinking about that, what to write. Ethics. What the things related to ethics? Number 1, what's the issue here? Issue me identify the issue. Accounting issue. And in fact, here, if you identify the accounting issue, you actually refer the above. You actually reference the above one. That's something IFRS 13 is misusing. And it's better to make a reference that what the threads here. Threads, for example, something about self-interest. Try to incorporate this thing and reflecting towards the compromising. What compromising? The rule of conduct or the code of conduct. self-interest compromising objectivity, integrity. Code of ethics. So it's better to make reference. And finally, with the action points. And this is what, with the regular lectures, you have already identified with ethical points, whatever I have discussed. That's the point. So this is the first thing, that you have to make a good plan accordingly. Good plan. This is the first thing. So candidates, can you please reply me? Is that clear what I'm saying? Then I'm moving towards the final solution. Is my voice clear to all of you? Okay, now this is what about the answer. Number one, accounting implications. I have mentioned that accounting implications and identify the relevant facts. If in the examination question, the ethical issue, listen carefully, the ethical issue related to accounting matter. So whenever you are explaining the accounting matter, actually it's not only about the explanation of accounting implications, but also, or parallel with, identify the facts. So with the one description, there are two things you are elaborating or explaining. For example, here you will mention MASH is using an estimation technique of the fair value, and this is unobservable. And so according to IFRS 13, you can ignore the term fair value measurement. IFRS 13 is a level 3 input. MASH intention to hold asset is not relevant. Now connect the case. IFRS 13 said that fair value is a market-based measurement, not an entity-specific measurement. You can start the question matter, and if you write the question in this manner, for example, knowledge of the accounting standard. First, you state IFRS 13 state fair value is a market-based, not entity-specific. And then you mention that if the level 1 input which IFRS 13 prioritize, or you can say that to estimate the value of asset or liabilities, the level 1 input which IFRS 13 prioritizes. So this, you can write in this manner as well. That's first statement, first line, it's about explain. So this is what about the knowledge you have present. And now the another point is about case. In simple word, concise. Concise means just get the case, reference of the standard or reference of the topic, and connect with the case. Explain 1 or 2 line, connect with the case with the remaining 1 or 2 line. MASH is using an estimation technique to measure fair value. Okay, this is unobservable, and so according to IFRS 13 is a level 3 input. MASH intention to hold asset is not relevant here, but that should be measuring fair value using the level 1 input, quoted share price. That is level 1 input. So this is about accounting implications and identify the facts. Okay, just a minute. Okay, I have muted all the mics, huh? I've done it. That control also belongs to me. Okay, is that clear? Make sure that others microphones also muted to ignore the disturbance. So this is the first thing that we covered, and the idea how to answer the question. Number one. Number two, ethical implications. Ethics. For ethics, refer to my knowledge. Sorry, refer to my regular course. First of all, you have to write the basic wordings, the standard answer. You just put the standard answer to start the ethical points. For example, this one. This is standard paragraph. Financial statements are important to range of user groups such as shareholder, banks, employee, supplier. And these stakeholder requires financial statement are to faithfully represent the performance and position of company so that they can make adequate investment decision. This is a standard paragraph. For this, the accountant should comply with fundamental ethical principle, set out ACCA rule book to act integrity, objectivity, professional competence, due care, confidentiality, and professional behavior. By following the code ethics, it is more likely that if first paragraph is that what user expect, second paragraph is that ethical principle comply with all the things, third paragraph connecting second to one, that if we follow code of conducts, which means financial statement will make according to the user expectation, stakeholder expectation that faithfully represent of the company will be offered because the needs of user will be prioritized. This is a standard wordings. You can start the ethics from these wordings. Yes, you can squeeze your wordings. For example, the accountant should comply with fundamental ethical principles set out ACCA rule book. That's all. Or you can answer to act with integrity, objectivity, and all mentioned by code of conducts. Not necessarily to complete word by word. Here, financial statements are important to range of user group such as shareholders, banks, and etc. Then, who requires financial statement to present faithfully? That can make adequate investment decision. So you can squeeze your words accordingly. Ideally, you have to refer all the wordings. That's good. Otherwise, these two paragraphs and the third one you can put with your own wordings. This is what start the ethics matter with this standard paragraph. Moreover, if the ethics question is related to accountant, so we can use that paragraph. The accountant should be mindful of any threats of these fundamental and ethical principles. Do remember, it's not necessary always the ethical question belongs to accountants. But if something about accountant, you can use these words. And in doing so, accountant should consider facts, identify facts, relevant facts, then identify what ethical issues, then consider the fundamental principle which are threatened, and also consider either some internal procedure exists. Do remember, internal procedure is not about SBR, it's about audit. But we can mention here to mitigate the threats, and whatever the course of action could be taken. So actually, in the practical world, all the accountants deal the ethical issues with these steps. You know very well. Number one, identify the facts. Number two, what the principles, fundamental principles that are threatened, self-interest, coercion, like this. Is there any controls available in the company? And then finally, if all the things above done, what the course of action, if ethical issues compromises, what course of actions are can be taken by the employee or the accountant. So first, these paragraphs for ethics, standard. Next, if it's about the accountant's related matter, then you can put this paragraph. And then connect with the case. All the thing, connect with the case. Now the case, MASH. If the sole purpose of level 3 input, as referenced by the question, is increase the carrying amount of investment, this is the self-interest threat. Then this is self-interest threat, and this will compromise principle of integrity and issues about the biasness, that is called question about objectivity, that have been compromised. And if director is unaware about IFRS 13, then the question about professional competency. That is what the ethical connection. Stakeholders are becoming increasingly reactive to ethical stance of the company. Deliberate, and in fact, if they don't know the professional competence, if they do deliberate, that's another critical issue. Deliberate falsification of the financial statement could harm the reputation of the company and also harm the reputation of accountancy profession as a whole. What I personally think, in the model answer, this is extra paragraph. If you write that this matter, these 2 points, that's enough. That the case ethical issue, that's enough, because only the 5 numbers are available. We have to write the answer according to the marks, matter. And then finally, what should be the action point? What should be the action point? What should be the action point here? The accountant must not therefore comply with the director's instruction. First thing, accountant should not agree with because something wrong. How it's possible to how it's possible that we have to obey? Totally deny. The wrong is wrong. And the accountant should remind to the director of the obligation within the code of ethics. Should the accountant feel unable to approach director? Number one, first thing, denial. Number two, communicate with the director. What's our obligation? If not able to approach director, they could consider talking to charge with governance and coordinate with other management like non-executive directors for the situation. Even accountant could help ACCA ethical helpline and take legal advice. These all are actions. Ultimately, if situation cannot be resolved, the accountant could consider resigning and seeking employment elsewhere. Do remember that this is very much judgmental, whatever you conclude with the action points. And these are not very much standard. You have to practice the thing accordingly, how to handle the points. How to handle the point. You have to consider that point. So can you please reply me, is that clear, how to cover that part of the question and even identify your gaps, whatever you have done with the quiz or the mid-mock, and what should be the answer. Okay, can you please reply me, is that clear? Even you are taking the live session, you can reply me accordingly, don't worry. Now, the another question. Now the another part. Now the another part of the question. And the another part is about part B. 5 quarters, that's the question. The 5 quarters has purchased 100% of ordinary shares of 3 halves. And it's trying to determine the fair values of the net asset at acquisition date. 3 halves own land that is currently developed for industrial use. Okay. And the fair value of land, if used in manufacturing operations, is $5 million. The requirement is something about fair value of land. IFRS 13 specific paragraph, specific requirement, the fair value of non-monetary item, including intangible asset, including land building. Can someone here reply me about the issue of IFRS 13 here? One reply. The fair value of non-financial asset should be based on highest and best use. Memory. If it's possible, if it's possible to have a permission, then maximum benefit. Excellent answer. Excellent answer. Very good. Very good. Here the issue about sometimes whenever you are working with the questions, sometimes whenever you are working with the question, whenever you are working with the questions, sometimes accounting standard points automatically generates in your mind. Even you study the requirement in first 2 lines, that's something developing in your mind, something shaping in your mind. This is something the IFRS 13 non-monetary item, which about the alternative best use, fair value measurement must be made with the alternative and the best use, if allowed, if permitted, as mentioned by the Tala. If allowed, that's very good. So here about land, the fair value of land if used in a manufacturing operations, 5 million. Many nearby plots of land have been developed by residential use as high-rise apartment buildings. The land owned by 3 halves does not have planning permission for residential, although permission has been granted for similar plot of land. IFRS 13 says that it's not necessary that you have taken the permission. The important point is that in market, there is a norm that permission normally granted, because IFRS 13 is more about the market based principle. It's not about the entity specific. If if the standard about market specific, so we have to consider the market norm. That is the point. Okay. The fair value of 3 halves land as a vacant site for residential development 6 million. Although we are using for the manufacturing, but here about the residential development 6 million. But however, transformation cost 0.3 million would be need to be incurred to get the land into this condition. So the price, number one, the fair value must be based on alternative best use where the permission can be granted. And it's not about the 5 billion, but 6 minus 0.3, that is 5.7. But once again, this is what the numbers we have considered. But the point is that before attacking, before moving towards enter accordingly, we have to consider how we will write the answer and get the marks. How we will write the answer and get the marks. That's the point. So first of all, we have to make a very concise, clear and complete answer by putting the knowledge about IFRS 13. It doesn't matter if you provide the knowledge and simultaneously connect with the case. No worries about that. IFRS 13 about fair value measurement with alternative and best use, and either separately or simultaneously connect with the case. And this is the point. Please read once very carefully. Read this point very carefully. Number one, land is a non-financial asset. IFRS 13 says that fair value of the non-financial asset should be based on highest and best use. This is presumed to be current use unless evidence exists to contrary. Maybe the current use or the evidence means any alternative use. The current use of asset, you can mention the manufacturing facility, such as the 5 million. However, there is evidence that market participant would be interested in developing the land for residential use. Residential use of land is not legally prohibited. Similar plots of the land granted permission, so it is likely this particular plot of land will also be granted planning permission. If used for residential purpose, fair value of land would be 5.7. And it would be seen that the land's highest and best use is for residential development, so the fair value must be 5.7 billion. Okay, this is what all about the question 1. The students here, can you please reply me? What do you say? That's what you have done with the question. What do you say? How much? I mean, if I say that I shared with you the question 1, with you. What do you say? What's the gap between the answer that I have discussed with you and what you have done? Any comment? This is very important. 40% maybe. Okay. Anyone else? Anyone else? 30%. Okay. 50%. Very good. All of you have done a great job. Okay. That's the answer you have shared with me. But my next question is that. What do you think by next 1 month and 10 days, almost 12 days, I can say that 6 weeks, by next 6 weeks, what your mind says, what your heart says about that? Can you do that? Will you be able to do that? Inshallah, may Allah willing. That means your inner says that you can do that. Yes, your inner says that you can do that. That means if 6 weeks ago you are able to answer the question, the 40% of the mark, 40%, may Allah willing, if you put efforts, that you can expand your position, you can definitely increase or enhance your position till 80, 90 or 100%. So that's why I must say you have to cover the part of syllabus as soon as possible. Watch the video of entire syllabus with the roadmap as soon as possible. Because the important point is that about the practice question that we will do during these live sessions. I'm going to announce a very detail of the live sessions by inshallah maximum by Friday. If possible, attend the live session. If not possible, just work out with respect to this. I mean, watch the recordings. Yes, that is the point. Now the next question. So the important point is that we have done about the question number 1. Now the next session is about question number 2, Lyria.